we're talking about one of my favorite topics, communication. You might remember that earlier in the class I confessed to you that my husband says I have the spiritual gift of talking. And I do love to talk, primarily because I love people. And when you talk, you are connected with others. Aren't you grateful that when God created human beings, He gave us the ability to communicate with each other? And I know how difficult it is when I have laryngitis. That's one of those things I get every now and then. And when I can't talk, it is so frustrating because I feel like I am not my personality, but also I am not able to interact with others. And so I feel isolated and alone. I'm so grateful for communication, especially communication in marriage. It's integral to our marriage relationship to not only talk, but continue talking. So this week, as you read, as you study, as you look at the PowerPoint slides about communication, we're going to be talking about levels of communication. Sometimes that surface level communication, and sometimes the deeper communication. All are important as we interact with other people. We're going to talk about the difference between hearing and listening. Yeah, sometimes we hear noises, but we don't always listen and understand what people are saying. We're going to talk about the importance of nonverbal communication. Most of the message that we communicate is communicated without words. In other words, the message, the intent of what we're saying is communicated with our tone of voice, our facial expression, our gestures. All of that nonverbal communication matters a lot when we are saying something to someone else. One of my favorite aspects of communication is gender communication. How do men and women communicate differently? Well, God did create men and women different, so therefore you would expect that we're going to communicate in different ways and for different reasons. One of my favorite authors is a lady named Dr. Deborah Tannen. She and her colleagues in a northeastern university have spent years studying the differences between the way men and women communicate. And you'll have the opportunity to see these on your PowerPoint slide, but I want to highlight some of them because I find them to be so real in my life personally as I interact with my husband or as I interact with men on our church staff or here at the seminary. I think you'll find it to be true that men and women are so different in the way that we communicate that it's almost like we speak different languages. Dr. Tannen developed a term called genderlect. Kind of sounds like dialect, doesn't it? Because genderlect is the language of the sexes, the language of men versus the language of women. We need to understand it so that when we're talking to someone of the opposite gender, that we can adapt or flex, and that's called gender flex. So let me just highlight for you, and I wonder if you can think of examples in your own interactions with your husband, if you've got a son, with your father, with a brother, with an uncle, with someone in ministry that you work with that's a guy. You'll find these major differences in the way men and women communicate. Women communicate to maintain intimacy or relationships. Men communicate to maintain status. Therefore, men oftentimes talk about their successes, whereas women are hesitant to boast. I hear it around the seminary. Guys talk about how many were in church, or how much money was given in the offering, or how many people made decisions for Christ. Well, those are wonderful things to celebrate, but women would be uncomfortable because, again, we would never want someone, a girl, to feel lesser than we. So we communicate for different reasons. Women communicate because it sounds like sometimes we're complaining. We kind of talk about the problems that we're experiencing, but men, they want to give a solution. So if you do want to whine, ladies, sometimes we just like to whine or have a pity party. Well, find a girlfriend to do that with because men, they're going to want to solve that problem. Men give information. Women give affirmation. So oftentimes when men talk, it sounds like they're giving a report, whereas women are talking about feelings, men are talking about facts. It sounds like men report talk, whereas women rapport talk. In other words, we talk in order to maintain or build rapport with others. Men sometimes sound like they're lecturing. They're speaking pretty much at us or to us, whereas women are better listeners. I was grateful to hear this to read this in Dr. Tannen's research that women do listen better than men. And again, that's not to bash men or to criticize men, but just to see God created us differently and how important it is, especially in ministry. I think we ladies, we ministry wives, can often listen in ways our husbands don't, and we can help them to be more sensitive to situations as they're developing. Men are comfortable with conflict. They use conflict because they've been, competing with other men all of their lives, so they don't think anything about it. Now, we women, on the other hand, when it comes to communication and conflict, we avoid it because we take things personally. So we have to be aware of that and be careful not to let our feelings get too involved. Few more things that are differences between the way men and women communicate. Men interrupt. Women overlap. I love the title of the book, Men Are Like Waffles and Women Are Like Spaghetti. And that's a great illustration of how men do kind of compartmentalize their thoughts and their interactions. So a man speaks, and when they have something to speak, they just blurt it out. Whereas we ladies, we can all talk at the same time. We can all listen at the same time. We're kind of like spaghetti, and we overlap. Men talk more in public. Women talk more in private. That's why it seems like women talk more than men. However, studies have demonstrated that men and women use the same number of words in a day. The difference is men use their words at work. Women save their words for home, and so their husbands get home and they're ready. Your husband wants to sit in the recliner chair and watch TV, and you're ready to just share all your words with him for the day. So we have to be aware of that and adapt appropriately. Men do talk more in public, women more in private. Men talk more about their accomplishments while women are hesitant to boast. Men are more comfortable with silence. Women are uncomfortable with silence because if there's not talking, many times we think something's wrong. We've said something wrong. We've hurt someone's feelings. So we have to be aware of that. Men talk with confidence. They speak with confidence. Women are hesitant often and apologize. So if you're talking to men, I found this especially true for me when I went to the budget committee at my church. Speak with confidence so that they'll listen to what you have to say and get to the bottom line real quickly because they're not too interested in a lot of details. Well, the final thing, just to contrast the way men and women communicate, is the use of nonverbal communication. Men are indirect with their nonverbal communication. Women are very direct. That's why many times we're touchy-feely. We want to put our hand on the person we're talking with. We tend to be more huggers because, again, God created women to be relational. Isn't it interesting to know that everything about men and women are different by God's perfect design? Not that one is better or the other is lesser, but we are of equal worth and value with different roles and functions. And when it comes to communicating, we've got to understand the language of the opposite sex so that we can get along better and we can minister. So I pray this week you'll be noticing ways that you communicate differently than your husband, and as you do, you'll make some adaptations which will improve your communication. God bless, and I'll talk to you next week.